Hi, everybody. We're just going to give a quick moment for folks to join in on the call. And once the numbers stop going up, then we'll go ahead and get started. Well, the numbers look like they're slowly creeping to a stop here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today for the Climate and Fisheries Adaptation Program's FY23 Competition Information Session on the full proposals. I am Jen Dubkowski. I'm the NOAA Research Climate Program Office CAFA Program Manager, and we've got a great CAFA team here today. I'm going to introduce a few people and have them wave, say hi, whatever they're comfortable with, and then I'm going to have them hop off camera and we'll get to the presentation. So our Climate and Fisheries Adaptation Program Management team is comprised of myself, as well as my NOAA Fisheries CAFA Program Manager, Roger Griffiths. Roger, if you want to hop on and say hi, if you can. There, nope, that's Jay. As well as our Fisheries Biologist, Jay Peterson, and our Research Associate Grace Raskar, and Amanda Speciali, who is behind the scenes running the support for the webinar for us. Thanks, Amanda. And we've also got Debbie Gallo, who is our grants management specialist. So together we're all going to work to answer your questions and get you the information that you need to submit a proposal. Next slide, please, Grace. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera at this point. Okay, so if you guys can hear me, it means that you're obviously connected to the broadcast and have audio. But we included a link here in case you have audio issues. You can call in using this number and the access code. If you have feedback and you're connected via the phone, you might want to hang up and make sure your computer's audio is turned off. For questions, include them in the question section, not the chat, and select to all panelists so that we can all see the questions. And then finally, we're going to make sure that this is obviously recorded, but we're also going to post it on the website after, so that if you miss parts of it or need to go back, you can feel free to go ahead and look at it online. Next slide, please, Grace. So just an overview about today. For those of you who aren't familiar with our program, we're going to give you a brief overview of the CAFA program. We're going to give you some information about the competition, how to submit a full proposal, timeline, including deadlines and deliverables, a few additional steps, and then some frequently asked questions and reminders. And at the very end, we're going to do a Q&A session. So some of you actually did either submit questions via the GoToWebinar registration, or you sent me individual questions. And so what we've been trying to do is do our best to answer those questions ahead of time. We're going to go through questions that have been submitted via GoToWebinar first, and then any ones that you want to put in the chat, we'll touch on those next. But with the caveat that in the interest of time, we're going to try and just touch on those questions that can't be answered as part of the NOFO, meaning if you can find the information in the full information sheet or the full NOFO, then we're probably going to skip over that question. So if you've asked a question and we didn't answer it, that might be the reason. So don't think we're ignoring you. It just might be that it's something we can touch on in the NOFO. Next slide, please, Grace. So the Climate and Fisheries Adaptation Program was established in 2014. It was originally the Coastal and Ocean Climate Applications Program, COCA, in partnership with NOAA Fisheries Office of Science and Technology. And this was a partnership to advance understanding of climate-related impacts on fish stocks and fisheries, and engage with communities related to impacts engage with communities to develop tools and information to promote adaptation and resilience of the nation's fisheries and fishery-dependent communities. Now in FY21, we went through a name change. COCA Fish, as it was affectionately known, was renamed the Climate and Fisheries Adaptation Program to reflect its incorporation into the Adaptation Sciences portfolio within the Climate Program Office where I work and Climate and Societal Interactions Division. CAFA supports targeted research to promote adaptation and resilience of the nation's valuable fisheries and fishing communities in a changing climate. Next slide, please, Grace. So a little overview of the actual competition itself. We are competition number 6 in the Climate Program Office's Competition Information Suite. And we are looking for 2 different kinds of proposals. There are 2 research topic areas. Type A proposals are focusing on advancing multidisciplinary systems to evaluate strategies that promote resilience and adaptation of fish stocks, fisheries, and fishing communities. And these projects can be up to 3 years in duration with a budget of up to $400K per year. Type B proposals are aimed at advancing understanding of and enhancing the effectiveness of locally determined adaptation planning in frontline fishing communities. Those projects can also be up to 3 years in duration with a project budget of up to $200K. Next slide, please, Grace. So here are a few bullets associated with each type of the proposals, and I'm going to touch on type A first. These obviously, as we mentioned before, are used to, we're going to build on existing efforts to develop multidisciplinary modeling systems to help evaluate the performance of fisheries management strategies, inform climate resilient fisheries management, and the adaptation pathways of fishing communities. We've included some criteria there where applicable to provide climate-related data for fisheries management considerations, including the use of predictions and projections associated with MOM6. And we also have, the other bullet here is that we're increasing understanding of how climate variability and change interacts with other stressors to affect ecological, social, economic systems, and how management strategies will perform under current and future conditions. And we also emphasize the interest of collaborating with and or leveraging both NOAA and non-NOAA programs and entities. Next slide, please, Grace. Type B proposals are focused on participatory research that's advancing the understanding of frontline fishing communities and climate adaptation of those frontline fishing communities. We're building on existing efforts with this one as well, but also focused on social science methodologies, including something that I've gotten several questions about actually, including the incorporation of, where applicable and you're able to do so, protocols and processes to include cultural data, resources, and local indigenous traditional ecological knowledge, or ITEK. Next slide, please, Grace. So we've gotten a few questions also as well about the regions, and these are all of the regions that we are focused on for this call. You'll notice that it does not include the Great Lakes this time. And just a clarification question or comment, the Insular Pacific Hawaiian region includes the main Hawaiian Islands, extending out to the far northwest islands, Kiri Atoll and Midway Atoll, but it does not include Palau, the Federated States of Micronesia, or the Marshall Islands. Also, an important point to note is that you can focus on more than one region. Next slide, please. Wanted to highlight this as its own slide. I had previously sent out an email that had said we were not able to include federal travel as part of your proposals, but we are able to include federal travel as part of your proposals. And if you have additional questions about that, you should look at the NOFO and I believe it's page 14 or 15 regarding what to include for federal travel. Next slide, please. So general information, and we've got a few links here as well that we can put in the chat for you if you're interested regarding where to find specifics on both the information sheet, the full NOFO, and we also have a CAFA specific page that has frequently asked questions there that we've gotten from both the information session that we did for the LOI phase and questions that we've received since then. We're going to actually update that page after this conversation today to include any questions that you might ask that we haven't already covered. So you can refer back to those links and pages as well. And then the FFO is the full competition information sheet, meaning it includes all 6 competitions in that federal funding opportunity sheet. The information sheet itself is just a link for the CAFA information sheet that has all the criteria and information for our specific competition. And the process for submission and review of proposals, at this point, we are in the phase where we're looking for application submissions. And after that, we are going to have review panels. And then after that, we will provide, or the panel will provide recommendations for funding to our team. Next slide, please. Okay, so some information here on the full application. It's key to note that if you didn't submit an LOI, that does not mean you cannot submit a full proposal. You may still submit a full proposal. LOIs are not required. For those of you that have under 3 principal investigators, the full proposal limit is 35 pages. If you have 3 or more, or I'm sorry, 3+ principal investigators, it can be 40 pages. Single space, 12-point font, 1-inch margins. These are all the things on the left that you do want to include in the proposal. Your page limit does not include your indirect cost rate, among other things. Next slide, please, Grace. So this is important to note here. You would want to make sure that your Grants Online account is up to date, established. You have all the information set up. I would encourage you to go ahead and get that process started now to work with your grants office. And the full application submission deadline is November 21st, 2022, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I just want to emphasize this because I did receive some LOIs a little late in the day, and I want to just remind everybody that that's a hard deadline. After 5 o'clock East Coast time, that submission is closed, and that is the week of Thanksgiving. So just wanted to flag that for everyone as well. Next slide, please, Grace. So this is on the review panels. We undergo a 2-stage review process, and we're actually going to be likely to run 2 separate panels, one for type A proposals and one for type B proposals. And each one of those separate panels is going to have 2 stages. The first stage is comprised of technical review, which includes technical merit, the qualifications of the team, and also your budget. Stage 2 is relevance, and that is a percentage score of 30%. Obviously, this is the caveat here. Final decisions are conditional on funding availability. Next slide, please, Grace. So this is just something we wanted to touch on as part of the, after, if you've been recommended for funding, what we are looking for from teams. Obviously, one of the things that you're expected to do is provide reports, progress, and things like that. And I also included here that you want to include your relevant DEIA activities as part of that reporting process. We also expect that you would participate in a PI community of practice. I did get a question about whether or not this would be virtual or in person, and we have been running the one we currently have virtually, so I would anticipate that that would continue. And so that's an opportunity for you to interact with other principal investigators, to share methods and results, and have an opportunity to engage with that community, with us as well, the CAFA team. Next slide, please. So again, just to reiterate, full application submission deadline, November 21st, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We anticipate that we're going to hold panels somewhere between February and March of 2023 and provide recommendations for funding in summer 2023 with an estimated start of fall 2023. In my email, I believe I told folks I would estimate a start date of September 1, 2023, give or take, but I would say start with that as your project start date. And next slide, please, Grace. Just a few things here I wanted to flag again. I've gotten some questions about protocols and processes for ITEK. And so I just want to reiterate that where possible and applicable, you want to include either existing protocols or process to include data, resources, and local indigenous traditional ecological knowledge. And that we encourage multidisciplinary and diverse teams where possible, as well as partnerships with state, tribal, local NGOs, and other NOAA offices are encouraged. And next slide, please. One of the key things I would want to emphasize on this slide is just to make sure that you clearly articulate what kind of proposal that you're applying for. If you're applying for a type A, you want to make sure you call that out clearly somewhere. A type B, same thing. And also, again, just to remember that the regions that we're focused on are LMEs, and that there are limits to what is included as part of the Insular Pacific Hawaii LME. And we call out fishing communities here that it does include commercial, recreational, and subsistence fishing. And fish and fisheries in this call includes finfish and shellfish. Next slide, please. Again, to reiterate, just make sure you're up to date on your grants.gov account. Make sure everything is, you have all the information that you need to go into grants.gov and submit an application. Federal employees should submit the proposal directly to the competition manager. And matching funds and cost sharing are not required, but leveraging and sharing of resources should be reported within the proposal. Next slide, please. So I think we'll probably leave this one up here for you. Both Roger and I have our emails listed here. I am the federal program officer. Roger and I co-manage the program. So if you have questions, please feel free to email us. But I think now at this point, what we can do is, Jay, if you want to queue up any questions that we might have, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, it'd be great. Yeah, and a reminder, so if questions from people on this call, put them into the question box, not the chat box on the side, but enter the question there and we'll try and get to it. A few, as Jen said, a few were submitted earlier before this call, and so there's a couple to go through. Two of them were on the statement for type B proposals. There was a statement that said those type B proposals should develop and incorporate protocols and processes to include cultural data, resources, and local indigenous traditional ecological knowledge, or ITEK, and other non-Western scientific knowledge to enhance Western science data. So there are two questions around that. One, how strictly should type B proposals meet that requirement to develop and incorporate protocols? And then the second follow-up question on does it mean that proposals need to develop new methods to collect ITEK, or is leveraging sufficient?
So I'm going to hit the second question first, and the answer is no, you do not need to develop new methods or protocols. Leveraging existing ITEK protocols and practices is perfectly acceptable. And to answer the first question, where applicable and where appropriate, we are encouraging the incorporation of ITEK principles and data and information into your proposals.
Okay, good. The other question was, can a person be included on more than one proposal? And if so, what roles can they take? PI co-I or PI collaborator, that sort of thing.
Yep, and I think, and Debbie, just clarify this one for me if I get this one incorrectly, but I think that you want to make sure that you're not spreading yourself too thin, obviously, but you don't want to commit more than 50% of your time, I believe it is. I'm trying to scroll here and find the answer, on any more than one proposal. There, I don't think there's a limit. I think there's probably a limit on the number of hours in your day.
Okay, so a number of questions are coming in. I think I'll just have to read them as they come in, and and if they can be answered, great. If you have to reach out, that's fine too. So one is, can you discuss the submissions process from multiple institutions if not using a subaward? Are subawards allowed?
Sure. So for multiple institutions, I believe every institution submits their own application, and I believe there are sections in the NOFO that address what sections, meaning let's just say University B and NOAA Institution A, there are certain sections in each one of those proposals that should correlate and be similar, and there are sections that should be different, but that is addressed in the NOFO. So I would recommend looking at the NOFO again, and if there's an additional question or clarity that needs to happen, I'm happy to address that.
Okay. One is, should academic institutions submit through NOAA cooperative institutes or through regular academic departments?
I am not sure about that one. Debbie, I don't know if you have an answer to that, but if you don't, Jay, if you have the email for the person, we can get back to them.
Okay. Yeah, I'll try and pull that out. One is, could you please clarify DEIA principles?
Sure. Any best practices, principles that would include ITEK into the proposal and be used to help validate Western science data.
All right. One is, do you need to have an existing indirect cost rate agreement to apply for funding?
I think that's something that's touched on in the NOFO, and I believe, trying to look as we're talking here. I think if you don't have one established, it looks like it's on page 24 of the NOFO related to indirect cost rate. So I would say you would want to look first at the NOFO, and if you need further clarity on that one, then I'm happy to try and help figure that one out.
Okay. There's one on, if a federal institution requests funds, is the amount requested part of the proposal limit, i.e. the $400,000 a year for type A?
Yes.
Right. One is a tough. Can we include a course buyout in the budget if our teaching load is high? Is it an allowable expense?
Unfortunately, I do not believe it is. I think that was something we got as a question during the LOI phase. I do not think course buyouts are allowable, unfortunately.
Okay. Let me see. One road, do we need to include an evaluator in our proposal?
An evaluator, I guess I would need a little more clarification on what the purpose of the evaluator would be.
Yeah, so maybe that's a good one to submit. Whoever asked that, if you can submit an email to Jennifer, that would be helpful on that, just to clarify. Can you provide any more detail about the focus on federally managed or co-managed fisheries or communities that interact with federally managed fisheries? In communities that rely on state and federal fisheries, is it appropriate to focus on adaptation strategies that span both?
Okay, so Roger, you might have to help me out with this one. Fisheries, you said federally managed fisheries versus state managed fisheries. Sorry, Jay, can you read the question again?
Can you provide detail on the focus on federally managed or co-managed or communities that interact with federally managed? In communities that rely on state and federal fisheries, is it appropriate to focus on adaptation strategies that span both the state and federal fisheries? I believe.
I believe the focus on this one, Roger, is on federally managed species, correct?
Yeah, I think that's our primary focus, or co-managed species. I think that would be the priority interest here. I mean, given some of the fisheries that are co-managed, I think the question's coming from the angle of the communities, and the communities will be involved in perhaps both, could be involved in both the co-managed. So I think the answer is we're primarily interested in focusing these efforts on adaptation of those communities, depending on either federal fisheries or co-managed fisheries. But there's no reason why that study couldn't also be collecting information on or have a view towards some of the state fisheries, because they may be woven in, is what I'm trying to say. So, but I think we've clarified our priority. Yeah, thank you.
This one might also be for Roger. There's a type A proposal. Do we have to use MOM6 for ocean current modeling, or can we use existing ROMS output for our region?
Yeah, one can use existing ROMS output, given that that's what we're all currently using. The MOM6 outputs are not currently available. They're still in a testing phase. We mentioned them because they may be available during the course of the 3 years, and it may be an opportunity to begin weaving them into a study. But no, one can use the existing ROMS output. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks. One is on the regions. Are estuaries bounded by barrier islands? Do they qualify for type A grant in the Southeast region? I think, yeah.
That's a good question. How about we take down their name and get back to them?
Okay. Should NOAA PIs include both internal NOAA and external funding in their current and pending?
I believe the answer on that one is yes. Any current and pending funding that is going to be supporting some aspect of the work that they're doing. Debbie, do you have any additional thoughts on that? All right, I am going to say let's clarify that one with Debbie just to double check, Jay.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Let's see. Could you, oh, wait, let me see. I have a multi-institutional project, but I'm the sole PI. Can I create a subaward to the other institution without creating multiple applications, as the NOFO describes? It doesn't indicate when you need to create multiple applications.
I think that's also going to be a question that we're going to have to clarify with Debbie.
There was a question on, is this an annual award? In other words, do you think there will be another call at this time next year?
At this time, we don't anticipate another call again next year. We have, for the most part, been doing these on somewhat of a 3-year cycle. There have been a few years that we've done 2-year cycles, but we, for the most part, are doing 3-year projects.
Yeah. There was clarification on that earlier evaluator statement. That said by evaluator, they meant, do we need to include a team member whose role will be to evaluate and or measure project outcomes?
I guess if it's relevant to the work that they're doing and it's an evaluator is important to the outcomes that they expect to deliver, then I would say yes. But if it's not necessary to the work that they're doing or crucial, then I would say you base it on what your outcomes of your project are.
There's one on can summer salary for academic faculty be included in the budget?
Summer salary for academic. I'm gonna say I don't want to answer this one, but let's get a clarification from Debbie on this one as well.
Okay. One asked if there would be any reviewer or program feedback given on the LOIs that could be useful to develop a proposal. The person did not get any feedback with the initial response on our LOI, so perhaps there just wasn't any for us.
They can certainly reach out and follow up, and I'm happy to provide a overview, a summary, if there is something. We can't really touch on specifics related to specific research questions, but if there's overarching feedback, I can provide that.
Okay. There was a conflict of interest question. They contacted a NOAA regional office, and there were individuals interested in being team members, but they weren't sure if it would be a conflict of interest being included because they were also helping promote the CAFA call, or maybe had been involved with the CAFA program. So can you clarify if NOAA team members would be a conflict of interest?
I think we worry more about conflict of interest when it comes down to having panelists. We just want to make sure that individuals who are on the panel are objective and unbiased. So I think if there is an individual that's able to contribute to the project and participate, I don't perceive that as a conflict of interest.
Okay. Yeah, I think it would be fine. Good, thank you. One on regarding page limit and number of PIs. How do you define a PI versus other proposal participant? Is it one PI per institution? And then I think are the CVs and current and pending and budget counted in the page limit?
That's a really good question. We're going to have to clarify that one as well and get back to them. I don't want to steer them in the wrong direction and make them do more work. So if we could get an email and get back to that individual, that would be great.
Okay. And could you expand on the idea that the proposals should focus on federally managed fisheries, but applicants are encouraged to develop collaborations with state researchers / managers?
Sure. I think Roger may have jumped off the call at this point. I think he had to be on another call at 2:30. Jay, I don't know if you feel comfortable touching on that answer or if we should just reach out to Roger and get back to that individual.
Yeah, I mean, I thought we could reach out and clarify. I thought it was more just, we're encouraging collaborations with, I didn't remember the exact language, but with the state researchers and especially managers if they're working on that federally managed species as well. So
right.
the opportunities there, then looking for the broad engagement where possible.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. Are internationally managed fisheries considered fair game? Wow, that's a good question. I think we are focusing on federally managed fisheries. I know that some of the regions that we're touching on are obviously, like in the Hawaii Pacific crossover.
Yeah, and I think species like tuna, billfish that have the international component to it, I think were considered for funding, but at least in previous NOFOs.
Let's just say we're going to clarify and make sure that we give the correct answer there.
Does the socioeconomic component need to be integrated in each phase of the project for type A proposal?
I feel like That's a good question. I know that it's obviously an integrated multidisciplinary project, and these are multi-year projects. So I would say that it would really depend. I mean, I guess it depends on the scope of the project. But let's just, I want to make sure we clarify with Roger as well on that one.
Yeah. Okay. One is, do we need a letter of support for any agreement, or do we need a letter of support or any other agreement from a NOAA affiliated person agreeing to serve as our expert consultant? There's no conflict of interest, but is a letter of support needed?
So on page 15, bottom of the page, it does touch on letters of support there. And it says letters of support are not required. I would encourage you to look at the clarification there at the bottom of page 15 for letters of support. And if you don't feel that you've gotten the answer there, then please feel free to reach out.
Someone asked what proportion, I'm not sure this one I can answer, what proportion of LOIs were encouraged to apply?
I'm not sure if we're allowed to answer that question or not.
Yeah. Okay.
We did get a lot of interest in the funding opportunity. I will say that. I think that's about all I can say, unfortunately.
Yep. Okay. There's a question on, and maybe this will come up at the end, but we can answer it now. Can we provide answers to all these submitted questions to all the participants, or put them on the FAQ page?
Yes, that's what we did last time. We actually made sure that we had appropriate answers for all of the questions, and then I sent out a group email, blind CCing everyone with a PDF of the questions. And we also posted them on the website.
Okay. For type A proposals, how strict is the definition for modeling? Does it require known ecosystem fisheries models, or would simpler statistical models count?
You know, Jay, I'm going to defer to you on that one, I think, or Roger. I don't know if you have an answer, or if we should touch base with Roger on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think either count. There's no requirement for one or the other. It's just which ones are building on existing capabilities and improving current ability to do it. But so it's not, there isn't a I would say there's no strict definition for what's considered modeling. It's
right.
And no no restriction on it. Just whatever is appropriate and is going to help advance the information in that region. Can type A proposals fund field work?
I don't think these proposals are really focused on actual, well, you know, that's another good question. Let's get back to that person as well.
Okay.
And I think a follow-up to that would be a clarification on what field work entails would be good.
Yeah, I mean, I think the approach on that type A proposal was really building that integrated modeling system and being able to evaluate strategies. So I think in the past they haven't ruled out field work, but a lot of it was encouraging the use of existing data and building up on that. So yeah, I mean, I think we get back to clarify, but I would say field work isn't ruled out, but oftentimes we're really looking for using what's already in hand and expanding on those evaluating strategies for management.
Good answer, Jay.
For type A proposals, one of the expected deliverables a tool to develop adaptation strategies or inform adaptation strategies? In other words, would it be okay for a team to focus on the processes that inform socioecological adaptations, but not producing the tool to develop the strategies.
So the question is focusing on tool development versus evaluation of management strategies? Is
versus informing the adaptation strategies or improving them, as opposed to having a specific tool to.
I mean, I think the focus is on evaluating management strategies and informing adaptation, and an additional component of that could be a tool, but I think the key focus here is the evaluation of the management strategies and then informing adaptation.
Yeah, I thought tool was a potential example of something, but it wasn't a requirement for sure. So that informing or improving and assessing the adaptations
right.
are all valid. So good. Can funding for students involved in the project be a part of the budget? A stipend, can funding or a stipend for students involved in the project be a part of the budget?
I think so. Funding for students who are involved in the project, meaning they are collaborators on the project and are included in the project. I just saw I had a G chat from Debbie that says that her microphone is not working. She's not ignoring us. I think that we have to, I think funding for students could be included as part of it, but I want to clarify that.
Okay. For type A proposals, is engagement with industry, fishing industry, required or encouraged?
I mean, engagement with fishing industry isn't required, it's encouraged, especially because, you know, we're looking at management strategies and informing and evaluating best management practices. So I wouldn't say required, I would say encouraged. I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that, Jay.
No, that's, I mean, I'd definitely say it's definitely not required. Yeah, if it's appropriate, then yes. We should focus on federally managed fisheries and on one or more regions, but for type B proposals, research should enhance the effectiveness of locally determined adaptation planning in frontline fishing communities. Can the research and applications focus on adaptation through state level climate policies and programs rather than federal?
I think if I understand, can you read it one more time, Jay? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I guess bottom line was, can the research and applications in a type B proposal focus on adaptation through state level climate policies and programs rather than federal?
I think that it can. I think that, you know, obviously our emphasis on federally managed species, but I am not as knowledgeable about the interaction between federal and state fisheries management folks. But I would think that engaging with state entities to inform local adaptation through policy is acceptable.
Okay. Can funding for traditional knowledge holders be supported?
I guess I would need a little more clarification on what would that funding entail, and you know, is it funding for them to participate in the proposal? Is it, you know, are they a co-PI or are they a collaborator? What is, I would need a little more clarification on that one. Okay. Funding what, I guess.
Yeah, I couldn't remember. Did a question come up during the LOI session about whether you could provide funding to participate in surveys, or, and maybe that gets to funding to allow traditional knowledge holders to share their knowledge, whether they need to participate in a survey or at a meeting or other things.
I think, again, I guess funding, you know, we've, I believe in the past, funded incentivizing participation by different groups. But I guess I'm not really, I don't want to say for sure until I had a better understanding of what that funding is entailing. Is it funding for, say, incentivizing a traditional ecological or a traditional or native group to participate in community engagement or something like that? Or is it funding for a particular co-I who happens to be a Native American or a traditional group or something like that? I guess it doesn't, I'm not clear on what the funding would be for. So if I could, I could speak more to it if I had additional information.
All right. Yeah, hopefully they reach out to you directly, or we'll try and pull the name off the contact list here. I think last questions currently is there any specific format for CVs other than the guidance given on number of publications to use?
You know, I think it's touched on in the NOFO. Let me just see if I can scroll down here. I know what it says on page 15 is abbreviated CVs, and I think we've, you know, said in the past that, and I think Adrian had said this in the past as well, that, you know, if your CV is really long, obviously you want to encourage or condense, you know, to include the parts that are relevant to the competition. Jay, now I don't know if I actually answered the question.
Right, and I wasn't familiar how much guidance was in there, but it is, I believe they're part of the page count, right? So
yeah, I think they are. Let's see. Hey, Grace, could you possibly go back to the slide of what's included in the page count and what's not, please? I think it was like slide 15, 16, maybe. There we go. Yes, it's included in the page count. You know, obviously if you have a really long CV and not all of it is relevant to this competition, then I think it would be acceptable to highlight the key areas that are relevant to this competition and your expertise in those areas.
Okay, I think that's all the questions we had come through. That's all I'm seeing in the list.
I just realized I didn't ever turn my camera back on, so I apologize. Grace, can you go back to the last slide where it has our contact information, please? Just so that folks can see it, and I'm gonna, okay. So no more questions, Jay?
No, I don't see any more coming up.
I'm gonna just turn my camera back on really quick. I apologize, I had it off the whole time we were doing questions. So if you have additional questions and you don't feel like we covered them, please feel free to reach out to me or to Roger or both of us. It may take us a day or two because some of these questions are a little intricate and we want to make sure that we get you the appropriate answer. But my plan is that we're going to go through these questions and answer them, and we will create a document to share with all of you. And I'll send out a blind CC email, and we will also post them afterwards on the website. But I would encourage you to reach out if you have questions or concerns or don't feel that your question was answered appropriately. And I just wanted to say thank you to the team. And there are some questions I think Debbie probably will be able to help us out with as well, but we'll get in touch with her afterwards. So thank you to all of you for your interest, and thank you to the team. And we will be posting this within the next day or two. So thanks everyone, and you can have back 12 minutes of your afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.